A 14-year-old boy walked into the biggest bank in the city with holes in his shoes and $47 to his name. His mother was dying. He needed a miracle. Instead, he was humiliated. The richest man in the building laughed at him, called him nothing, called him a beggar. Then, just to prove how worthless this poor kid was, he made him an offer in front of everyone. "Open this safe, and I'll give you $100 million. Nobody had opened that safe in 50 years. FBI experts failed, master locksmiths failed, but this boy, he knew something nobody else knew. That safe had a secret. And so did the millionaire. Before diving into this gripping tale, let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch more inspiring stories like this one. $100 million, the man in the expensive suit said slowly, his gold watch catching the light as he pointed at the massive black safe. "If you can open this safe, boy, I will give you every single dollar." The bank went completely silent. Every person in that grand marble hall turned to look at the scene unfolding near the entrance. A thin boy in worn-out shoes stood frozen, his hand still on the glass door he had just walked through. His clothes were old and faded. His backpack had holes in 3 places. He clearly did not belong in this place, and everyone knew it. The rich man laughed. It was a cold, cruel laugh that echoed off the high ceiling and bounced off the marble walls. "What's wrong?" he said, taking a step closer to the trembling boy. "Cat got your tongue?" The boy's hands were shaking, but something strange happened. His eyes did not look away. They stayed fixed on the rich man's face with a quiet intensity that seemed out of place on someone so young. Something was about to change, something nobody in that bank expected. Ethan Parker was only 14 years old, but life had already taught him lessons that most adults never learn. He lived in a small apartment on the poor side of town with his mother, Grace. The apartment had just 2 rooms. The paint was peeling off the walls like dead skin. The heater barely worked in winter, and they often slept wearing 3 layers of clothes, but Ethan never complained, not once. Every morning, he woke up at 5 o'clock, before the sun came up. He would quietly get out of bed, careful not to wake his mother, and make his way to the tiny kitchen. There he would prepare breakfast, usually just toast with a little butter, sometimes eggs if they could afford them. He made breakfast for his mother because she was too weak to stand for long. She had been sick for 2 years now. The doctors said she needed an operation on her heart, but the operation cost money, a lot of money, money they did not have and could not even dream of having. Every night, Ethan would sit by his mother's bed and hold her hand until she fell asleep. He would watch her breathing, counting each breath, terrified that one night the breathing might stop. "You worry too much," Grace would say, stroking his hair with her thin fingers. "I'm going to be fine." But Ethan saw the truth in her eyes. She was getting weaker every day. On his wrist, Ethan wore his father's old watch. It was a simple silver watch with a scratched face and a worn leather strap. The watch had stopped working years ago, frozen at 9:47, the exact time his father had died. But Ethan never took it off. Not for showers, not for sleep, never. His father, Michael Parker, had been a locksmith, but not just any locksmith. People said he was the best in the whole state, maybe the whole country. He could open any lock, any safe, any door. His fingers could feel things that other people could not feel. His ears could hear things that other people could not hear. Rich people used to call him when they forgot their safe combinations. Banks called him when their vaults malfunctioned. Even the police called him when they needed to get into places that seemed impossible to enter. Michael Parker could open anything, but Michael Parker died 4 years ago. A car accident on a rainy night. The police said he lost control on a wet road. They said it was just bad luck, in the wrong place at the wrong time. He left behind a sick wife, a young son, and almost nothing else. Except his knowledge. Before he died, Michael spent hundreds of hours teaching Ethan everything he knew. They would sit together in the small workshop behind their apartment, surrounded by locks of every shape and size. "Feel this," Michael would say, handing Ethan a padlock. "Close your eyes, turn the dial slowly. What do you hear?" At first, Ethan heard nothing, just metal scraping against metal. But over time, he learned to listen deeper. He learned to hear the tiny clicks inside a combination dial. He learned to feel the subtle resistance when a pin found its place. He learned that every lock had a personality, a voice, a secret it was trying to tell. "This is our family gift," his father used to say, his eyes bright with pride. "Locks talk to us, Ethan. You just have to learn how to listen." Ethan remembered every lesson, every trick, every secret his father shared. But after Michael died, Ethan had no use for these skills. He was just a poor kid trying to survive. He did odd jobs after school to earn whatever money he could. He delivered newspapers in the early morning. He washed cars on weekends. He helped Mr. Bernard, the old mechanic down the street, fix engines and change tires for a few dollars here and there. Every penny went toward his mother's medicine. Their neighbor, Mrs. Chen, sometimes brought them food. "Just some extra rice," she would say, even though Ethan knew she barely had enough for herself. Mr. Bernard would sometimes pay Ethan more than the job was worth. "You worked hard today," he would say with a wink. "You earned it." Small kindnesses from people who had very little themselves. Ethan never forgot these kindnesses. He kept a mental list, promising himself that someday, somehow, he would pay them all back. That Tuesday morning in March, Grace's condition got worse. Much worse. Ethan woke up to the sound of her coughing, deep, rattling coughs that seemed to shake her whole body. When he ran to her room, he found her struggling to breathe, her face pale as paper, her lips slightly blue. "Mom," Ethan grabbed her hand. It was ice cold. "Mom, can you hear me?" "I'm fine," Grace whispered between coughs. Just need a moment." But she was not fine. Ethan could see it. Her eyes were unfocused. Her breathing was shallow and fast. She was slipping away right in front of him. He looked at the small jar on the kitchen shelf. Their savings. He had counted it last night. $47. That was everything they had in the world. The medicine she needed cost $200 for a 1-month supply, and the operation, $50,000 at the cheapest hospital. Other hospitals quoted even more. Impossible numbers, impossible dreams, but Ethan refused to give up. He had heard about a small loan program at First National Bank downtown. Someone at school mentioned it, a program that gave emergency loans to people in need. Maybe, just maybe, they would help. He made his mother comfortable, propping pillows behind her back, covering her with an extra blanket. "I'll be back soon," he said, kissing her forehead. "Please rest, please hold on." Grace grabbed his hand weakly. "Where are you going?" "To find help. I promise, Mom, I'm going to fix this." She smiled, but it was a sad smile. The smile of someone who had stopped believing in miracles a long time ago. Ethan grabbed his old backpack and walked out into the cold morning air. He did not know that this day would change his life forever. He did not know that by sunset, nothing would ever be the same again. First National Bank was the biggest and most important bank in the city. It sat in the center of downtown like a palace made of glass and marble. The building was so tall that Ethan had to tilt his head all the way back to see the top. Rich people went there, business owners in fancy suits, lawyers with leather briefcases, doctors with expensive watches. Important people with important problems, not kids like Ethan. When he walked through the tall glass doors, the security guard immediately looked at him. The guard was a big man with a shaved head and suspicious eyes. He looked at Ethan the way someone might look at a stray dog that had wandered into a fancy restaurant. "You lost, kid?" the guard asked, his hand resting casually on his belt. "No, sir," Ethan said politely, keeping his voice steady. "I'm here to ask about the emergency loan program." The guard raised an eyebrow. He looked Ethan up and down, the worn shoes, the faded jacket, the backpack with holes. His expression said everything. "You don't belong here." But he did not stop Ethan. He just shrugged and waved him toward the main counter. "Good luck with that," the guard muttered under his breath. Inside, the bank was even more impressive than the outside. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, sparkling like frozen waterfalls. The floor was white marble, so clean and polished that Ethan could see his own reflection looking back at him. Men and women in expensive suits walked past him without even glancing his way. Their shoes clicked on the marble floor. Their voices were low and confident. They moved like people who owned the world. Ethan felt invisible. Like a ghost that nobody could see, he walked slowly toward the main counter, trying not to make too much noise. A woman in a black dress sat behind the counter, typing on a computer. Her name tag said Patricia Wells, Senior Teller. She had perfectly styled blonde hair and long red nails. She did not look up when Ethan approached. "Excuse me, ma'am," Ethan said quietly. Patricia kept typing. "One moment." Ethan waited. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5. Finally, Patricia looked up. Her eyes scanned Ethan from head to toe. Her nose wrinkled slightly, like she smelled something unpleasant. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was flat, bored, annoyed. "Yes, ma'am, I want to apply for the emergency loan program for my mother. She's very sick and needs medicine." Patricia stared at him for a long moment. Then she smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was the kind of smile that made Ethan feel small. "The emergency loan program," she repeated slowly, like she was talking to a child who did not understand how the world worked. "And what collateral do you have?" "Collateral? Something of value, property, a car, jewelry. Stock certificates, something the bank can take if you don't pay back the loan." She leaned forward slightly. "Do you have anything like that?" Ethan's heart sank. I don't have anything like that. We just need help with medicine." "Then I'm afraid we can't help you." Patricia turned back to her computer, dismissing him completely. "The emergency loan program requires collateral. No exceptions." "But please, ma'am," Ethan said, his voice cracking slightly. "My mother is really sick. She might die without her medicine. Isn't there something you can do? Some other program?" "Anything," Patricia sighed heavily, like Ethan was wasting her precious time. "Look, kid, this is a bank. We don't give away money to anyone who walks in with a sad story. If you don't have collateral, you don't get a loan. That's how the world works. Now please step aside. There are people behind you with actual business to conduct." A large man behind Ethan pushed forward impatiently. "Move it, kid. Some of us have real business here. We don't have time for beggars." A woman nearby laughed softly. "Can you believe this? A street kid asking for a loan. What's next? Dogs applying for credit cards?" More quiet laughter rippled through the line. Ethan's face burned with shame. He felt tears threatening to form in his eyes, but he forced them back. He would not cry, not here, not in front of these people. He stepped aside, his head down, his fists clenched at his sides. What would Dad do? He thought desperately. What would he say? He thought about his mother, lying in bed, struggling to breathe. He thought about the $47 in the jar. He thought about the impossible mountain of debt that stood between them and survival. He started walking toward the exit, defeated, but one person was watching him differently. An old man sat in the waiting area near the windows. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and gray hair that was slightly messy. He wore a simple brown jacket that had seen better days, not expensive like the others in the bank. The old man watched Ethan with something like sadness in his eyes, or maybe it was recognition, like he was seeing someone he knew or someone he used to be. Ethan did not notice the old man. He was too busy trying not to fall apart. Then a voice boomed across the bank, loud and commanding. "Stop right there, boy." Ethan froze. The voice belonged to a man walking down the grand staircase at the back of the bank. Every eye in the building turned to watch him descend. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair combed perfectly back. His suit was dark gray, perfectly tailored, probably worth more than Ethan's apartment. On his wrist, a gold watch glittered under the chandelier lights. His shoes were so shiny they looked like mirrors. His name was Victor Aldridge. Everyone in the city knew who he was. He was one of the richest men in the entire state. He owned factories that employed thousands of workers. He owned hotels where movie stars stayed. He owned half the buildings downtown, including the one they were standing in. He sat on the bank's board of directors. Some people said he practically owned the bank itself, and right now he was looking directly at Ethan. "Come here," Victor said. It was not a request, it was a command. Ethan's legs felt like they were made of stone. But somehow he made himself walk toward the staircase. Each step felt like walking toward a lion's den. The whole bank was watching now. Tellers stopped typing. Customers stopped talking. Even the security guards stood at attention. Victor came down the last few steps and stopped directly in front of Ethan. He was so close that Ethan could smell his cologne, something expensive and sharp. Victor looked the boy up and down, slowly, deliberately. His eyes were cold and grey, like two pieces of ice. "So," Victor said loudly, making sure everyone in the bank could hear him, "you're the little beggar causing trouble in my bank." "I wasn't causing trouble, sir," Ethan said, forcing his voice to stay calm. "I just wanted to apply for, I heard what you wanted." Victor cut him off with a wave of his hand. "A loan for your sick mommy." He said the word mommy in a mocking, childish voice that made several people in the bank laugh. Ethan's fists tightened at his sides. He could feel anger rising in his chest, hot and sharp, but he did not let it show on his face. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. "She needs medicine." Victor leaned closer. His breath smelled like coffee and something sour. "And what makes you think," Victor said slowly, "that my bank should give money to someone like you? What do you have to offer?" "Nothing. You have nothing." "You are nothing." The words hit Ethan like physical blows. "You are nothing." Victor straightened up and smiled. It was the smile of a man who enjoyed causing pain, the smile of a bully who knew nobody would stop him. Then he turned to address the crowd gathered around them. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor announced, spreading his arms wide like an actor on a stage, "I have an idea. A little entertainment for this boring Tuesday morning." He snapped his fingers sharply. The sound echoed through the silent bank. Two security guards appeared from a side room, rolling a large black safe on a metal cart. The safe was old but massive, at least 4 feet tall and 3 feet wide. It had thick steel walls covered in black paint and a complex dial on the front with numbers ranging from 0 to 99. "This safe," Victor announced proudly, "belonged to my family for 3 generations. It was built by the finest craftsmen in Europe. The combination has been lost for 50 years. He paused for dramatic effect. "Experts from all over the country have tried to open it. The best locksmiths in America, engineers with fancy degrees, even a team from the FBI spent 3 days trying to crack it." He smiled widely. "Nobody has succeeded. Nobody even came close." Victor turned back to Ethan. His eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. $100 million, Victor said slowly, savoring each word. "If you can open this safe, boy, I will give you every single dollar. Cash, wired to any account you want, $100 million. The bank went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Ethan stared at the safe. His heart was racing so fast he could hear it pounding in his ears. $100 million. That was more money than he could even imagine. More than enough for his mother's medicine. More than enough for the operation. More than enough to change their lives forever. "What's wrong?" Victor laughed. "Cat got your tongue? You came in here begging for money, and now I'm offering you more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. All you have to do is open it a little safe." More laughter from the crowd. Someone called out, "Go ahead, kid, what do you have to lose?" Patricia Wells smirked from behind her counter. "This should be entertaining." The security guards exchanged amused glances, but the old man in the brown jacket was not laughing. He was watching Ethan with intense focus, like he was waiting for something. What would you do at that moment? A poor kid standing in front of the richest man in town. Everyone is watching. Everyone expects you to fail. Would you take the challenge, or would you walk away? Ethan looked at the safe again. Something about it seemed familiar, though he could not say why. Then he looked at Victor. "You're serious?" Ethan asked quietly. $100 million. Victor's smile grew even wider. "Completely serious, but of course you can't do it." "Nobody can. This is just to teach you a lesson, boy, a lesson about knowing your place in this world." Something shifted in Ethan's eyes. The fear faded. The shame disappeared. In its place came something else, something deeper and stronger. Determination. "Okay," Ethan said. "I'll try." Victor blinked. For just a moment his smile faltered. He had not expected that answer. "You'll try?" He recovered quickly, laughing loudly. "Fine, go ahead, waste everyone's time. Everyone gather around. Let's watch the street rat fail." The crowd moved closer, forming a semicircle around Ethan and the safe. Some people held up their phones to record. Others whispered to each other, already predicting how this would end. Ethan walked up to the safe. He stood before it, small and thin, against its massive black bulk. He placed his hands on the cold steel and closed his eyes. For a long moment, Ethan just stood there with his hands flat against the safe. The metal was cold beneath his palms, cold enough to make his fingers ache. The crowd began to whisper. What is he doing? Just stalling for time. Pathetic. He probably doesn't even know how a combination lock works. Victor really knows how to put on a show, doesn't he? But Ethan was not stalling. He was not showing off. He was doing exactly what his father had taught him to do. He was listening. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Every safe has a voice, Ethan. The dial, the gears, the bolts, they all speak to each other when they move. Most people can't hear them because they don't know how to listen. But we do. Our family does, we always have. Ethan slowly turned the dial to the right. His fingers moved with practiced ease, gentle but precise. Click, click, click. The sounds were tiny, barely audible. But to Ethan they were as clear as church bells. He stopped, reversed direction, left now slowly, click, click. His breathing was calm, his heartbeat was steady, the fear was gone, the shame was gone. The laughter of the crowd faded into background noise, meaningless and distant. At this moment, there was only Ethan and the safe, two old friends meeting for the first time. Victor watched with his arms crossed. His smile was still there, but something in his eyes had changed. A tiny flicker of something that might have been doubt. Taking your time, aren't you? Victor called out loudly. Maybe you need another 50 years, like everyone else who tried. The crowd laughed dutifully, but Ethan did not react. He was too deep in concentration to care about words. 2 minutes passed, then 5, then 10. The crowd grew restless. People started shifting their weight, checking their watches, looking at their phones. This is boring, someone muttered. He's just pretending. He has no idea what he's doing. Patricia Wells yawned loudly, not bothering to cover her mouth. Can we wrap this up? Some of us have real work to do. Victor nodded in satisfaction. See, I told you all. Impossible. The boy is just wasting everyone's time. Someone should. Then Ethan stopped. He stepped back from the safe. His face was pale. His hands were trembling. Well, Victor spread his arms wide in mock disappointment. Giving up already? I thought you were going to surprise us all. Ethan shook his head slowly. No, I need a moment. A moment for what? A moment to admit you're a failure, just like your father probably was. The words hit Ethan like a slap. His father. How did Victor know anything about his father? But he pushed the thought aside. He was staring at the safe with a strange expression. Not defeat, not frustration, something else entirely. Recognition. He reached out and touched the corner of the safe near the bottom right edge. The black paint was slightly chipped there, revealing bare metal underneath. And on that bare metal, barely visible, was a small marking, a symbol, 2 crossed keys inside a circle. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. He knew that symbol. He knew it as well as he knew his own name. It was his father's mark. Michael Parker had a tradition, a secret ritual that he shared only with Ethan. On every safe he built, every safe he repaired, every safe he touched, he would secretly engrave his personal symbols somewhere hidden. 2 crossed keys inside a circle, his signature, his legacy. This was not just any safe. This was one of his father's safes. But how? How was that possible? His father had never mentioned working for the Aldridge family. Never mentioned Victor at all. They lived in completely different worlds, unless there was something his father never told him, some secret he took to his grave. Ethan looked at Victor. The rich man was still smiling his cruel smile, but Ethan saw something new in his eyes now, something dark and guarded. Was it fear, anger, or was it guilt? What's wrong, boy? Victor asked. His voice was slightly sharper than before. You look like you've seen a ghost. Where did you get this safe? Ethan asked quietly. Victor's smile flickered, just for a fraction of a second, but Ethan caught it. That's none of your concern, Victor said. His voice had lost some of its mocking tone. Just open it or admit you can't. Those are your only options. Ethan turned back to the safe. His hands were trembling now, but not from fear, not from the cold, from something much deeper. This moment was bigger than money, bigger than proving himself to these rich strangers who looked down on him. This was about his father. He took a deep breath and went back to work. The old man in the brown jacket moved through the crowd, gently pushing his way toward the front. His name was Samuel Brody, and he had worked at First National Bank for 40 years before retiring last spring. Samuel knew things about this bank, secrets that had been buried for decades, things that most people had long forgotten. When he saw the boy touch that safe, when he saw the way the boy's fingers moved across the dial, something stirred in his memory. A memory from 15 years ago, when Samuel was still a young man working as a junior clerk. He remembered a locksmith who used to visit the bank, a young man with skilled hands and an honest, open face, Michael Parker. And he remembered the night everything went wrong. The night Michael Parker left the bank looking pale and angry, clutching a folder of papers to his chest. The night he had an accident on his way home. Samuel had always suspected there was more to that story. He had never had proof. But watching this boy, Michael Parker's son, it had to be. He felt the truth pressing against his chest like a weight. He said nothing, he just watched and waited. Meanwhile, Ethan was working faster now. His fingers flew across the dial with increasing confidence. Left, right, left again. The clicks were getting louder in his ears. Or maybe he was just getting better at hearing them. He could feel it. He was getting close. Victor was not smiling anymore. He was watching Ethan with growing alarm, his gold watch forgotten, his arms no longer crossed in arrogant confidence. His assistant, a thin man named Gregory with a nervous face and watery eyes, leaned close and whispered something urgent. Victor shook his head sharply. "It doesn't matter," he hissed back. "He can't do it. Nobody can." The combination died with, he stopped himself, but Ethan heard enough. The combination died with someone, with who? 15 more minutes passed. Ethan's forehead was covered in sweat. His arms ached from holding them at the same angle. His fingers were starting to cramp, but he did not stop. The crowd had grown larger now. Word had spread through the bank, and people were abandoning their business to watch. Even some people from the street had wandered in, curious about the commotion. Phones were recording from every angle. Someone was probably already posting this on social media. Then, click, a different sound, deeper, more final. Like the last piece of a puzzle falling into place. Ethan's heart jumped. He grabbed the thick handle of the safe and pulled. Nothing happened. The door did not move. Victor let out a long breath of relief. His smile returned, wider and more confident than before. "See, I told you all. Impossible. Even if you figure out the combination, the safe has additional security measures that, be quiet." Everyone turned to stare at Ethan. Had the poor boy just told the richest man in the city to be quiet? Ethan was not looking at Victor. He was running his fingers along the edges of the safe, searching for something. He remembered something his father once said during one of their training sessions. "Some safes have a secondary lock, Ethan, a failsafe. The combination alone won't open them. You have to find the hidden release. Usually it's somewhere unexpected." Ethan's fingers explored every inch of the safe's surface. Top, sides, back, bottom, there, a tiny groove near the bottom right corner, so small it was almost invisible. You would never notice it unless you were specifically looking for it. Ethan pressed the groove firmly. Something clicked inside the safe. A mechanical sound of gears releasing. Ethan grabbed the handle again. He pulled. The door swung open. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed. Then the crowd exploded. "Oh my God, he did it. That's impossible. Did you record that? Did you get it?" Victor's face had gone completely white. He looked like he had seen his own death approaching. "That's impossible," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "That's absolutely impossible." Ethan looked inside the safe. His eyes went wide. Inside, there were no stacks of gold bars, no piles of cash, no diamonds or precious gems. Instead, there were documents, old folders, yellowed papers, and one other thing, a photograph. Ethan reached in with trembling hands and picked up the photograph. It was old and slightly faded, but the image was clear. Two men shaking hands, smiling at the camera. One of them was much younger, but Ethan recognized him immediately. Victor Aldridge. maybe 30 years younger, with darker hair and a thinner face, but the same cold eyes. And the other man, Ethan's breath caught in his throat, Michael Parker, his father. On the back of the photograph, someone had written in neat handwriting, "Partnership agreement signed, Parker and Aldridge Security Systems, equal partners, May 15th. Ethan's world tilted on its axis. He looked up at Victor with new eyes full of questions, eyes full of dawning understanding. "You knew my father," Ethan said. His voice was barely above a whisper, but in the sudden silence, everyone heard him. "You were partners." Victor said nothing. His face was a mask of fury and fear, twisting together into something ugly. The crowd began to murmur. Maury phones came out. Someone in the back was already calling a news station. "What is this?" Patricia demanded from behind her counter. "What's going on?" But nobody had answers. All eyes were on Victor and the poor boy who had just opened the impossible safe. Samuel Brody stepped forward from the crowd. His old voice carried across the silent bank with surprising strength. "I remember now," he said. "I remember everything." Everyone turned to look at the elderly man in the brown jacket. Victor's eyes narrowed with recognition and fear. "You," Victor said, "you're supposed to be retired. What are you doing here?" "Just collecting my pension," Samuel said calmly. "But now I'm remembering something I should have spoken about years ago." He turned to address the crowd, his voice steady and clear. 15 years ago, two young men started a company together. One of them was a brilliant engineer named Victor Aldridge. The other was a genius locksmith named Michael Parker. The name Parker rippled through the crowd. People glanced at Ethan, then back at Samuel. Michael designed the safes. Revolutionary designs, unlike anything the world had ever seen. Unbreakable, they said. Banks wanted them. Governments wanted them. The company was going to change the entire security industry. Samuel paused, his eyes meeting Victor's. But then 4 years ago, Michael Parker died in a car accident. A tragic accident, everyone said, just bad luck. He took a deep breath. And somehow, mysteriously, everything Michael built, all his designs, all his patents, all the rights to his inventions, ended up belonging entirely to Victor. Michael's family got nothing, not a single penny. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. People were connecting the dots. Ethan stared at the old man. "You knew my father?" "I did," Samuel said, his eyes softening as he looked at the boy. "He was a good man, honest, kind. He trusted people too easily." He glanced at Victor. "He trusted the wrong person." Victor's composure finally cracked, his face twisted with rage. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "Ancient history. Lies and fantasy from a senile old man. I don't have to explain anything to anyone, especially not to some street urchin and a retired nobody." He pointed at the security guards. "Get this boy out of my bank. And confiscate that safe. Those documents are private property." The guards hesitated. They looked at each other, then at Victor, then at the crowd of people recording everything on their phones. "Move," Victor screamed. "I'm ordering you to remove this boy right now." One guard, the same one who had questioned Ethan at the door, stepped forward reluctantly. He reached toward Ethan's arm. "Don't touch that child." The voice came from the entrance. Everyone turned. A woman had entered the bank. She was tall and striking, with gray-streaked dark hair pulled back from a sharp, intelligent face. She wore a black coat over a dark suit and carried a leather briefcase. She walked toward the group with complete confidence, like she owned the building. "Who the hell are you?" Victor demanded. "My name is Martha Collins. I'm an attorney specializing in corporate fraud and inheritance law." She stopped directly in front of Victor, completely unintimidated by his fury. "And I've been investigating you, Mr. Aldridge, for a very long time." Victor's face went from red to white. "This is harassment. This is a conspiracy. I'll have your license revoked. I'll destroy you." "I don't think so." Martha turned to Ethan with a gentle smile. "You must be Michael's son. You look just like him." Ethan nodded slowly, still clutching the photograph. "You knew my father too. Your father was a friend of my father's. They grew up together. When Michael died, my father suspected something was wrong. He asked me to look into it. I've been searching for proof ever since." She glanced at the open safe and the documents inside. "I think you just found it." She held out her hand. May I see those documents? Ethan hesitated. This was all happening so fast. Yesterday, he was just a poor kid trying to find money for medicine. Now people were talking about partnerships and fraud, and his father's death like it was some kind of mystery. Could he trust this woman? Could he trust anyone? Martha seemed to understand his doubt. Her eyes softened. I know this is overwhelming, but those papers might prove what really happened to your father. They might give your family justice. Please, Ethan, let me help you. Ethan looked at Victor. The rich man's face was twisted with barely controlled rage. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. Then Ethan looked at Samuel, who nodded encouragingly. He handed the documents to Martha. She opened the first folder carefully and began scanning the contents. As she read, her expression changed from focused to shocked to absolutely furious. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced loudly, making sure every phone in the room would capture her words, these documents are partnership agreements, contracts, financial records. They prove beyond any doubt that Victor Aldridge forged Michael Parker's signature on multiple documents after his death. He stole every patent, every design, every asset that rightfully belonged to the Parker family. She looked directly at Victor. Everything you built your empire on was stolen from a dead man, from this boy's father. The crowd erupted. People shouted questions. Camera flashes went off. Someone called out, "Is this true, Mr. Aldridge?" Victor looked around wildly, like a trapped animal. "This is fabrication. This is fake. She planted those documents. They're all working together to destroy me." "Actually," Martha said coldly, "these documents match the handwriting samples and financial records I've already obtained through legal discovery. My team has been building this case for 3 years. We just needed the originals." She pulled out her phone. "And now I'm calling the police. Fraud, forgery, theft of intellectual property. And possibly," she looked at Ethan meaningfully, "much worse." For one brief, shining moment, Ethan felt like justice had finally arrived, like his father's death meant something, like everything was going to be okay. Then something happened that shattered everything. Patricia Wells, the rude teller who had dismissed Ethan so coldly, suddenly pushed through the crowd. "Wait," she shouted. "Everyone wait." She pointed at Ethan with a trembling finger. "This boy is a thief. I saw him earlier when he first came in. He was reaching into other customers' bags. He stole a wallet and planted those documents himself." Ethan's jaw dropped. "What? I never stole anything. I was standing right here the whole. I saw him," Patricia insisted. "He's a criminal. This is all a setup." The crowd's mood shifted instantly. People looked at Ethan with new suspicion. Samuel stepped forward angrily. "That's a lie. I watched this boy from the moment he walked in. He never touched anyone or anything except that safe." "You're protecting him," Patricia shouted back. "You're all in on it together." Victor seized the chaos. His panicked expression transformed into righteous outrage. "See, I told you, this is a conspiracy. That boy is a criminal, just like his father was. Michael Parker was a fraud and a liar, and his son is following in his footsteps." The security guards looked confused and uncertain. Half the crowd seemed ready to defend Ethan, the other half looked suspicious. Martha stepped between Ethan and the growing chaos. "Nobody is arresting this child without evidence," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Miss Wells, you've just made a very serious accusation. Can you prove it?" Patricia's confidence wavered slightly. I saw." "You saw what exactly? Can you describe the wallet? Can you identify the customer it belonged to? Do you have any security camera footage?" Patricia's eyes darted nervously toward Victor, and that glance told Ethan everything he needed to know. "She's lying," Ethan said quietly. "He told her to say that." Martha nodded slowly. "Actually, I've been investigating Miss Wells as well. She's been receiving monthly payments from a private account for the past 5 years. Would you like to tell everyone who owns that account, Patricia, or should I?" Patricia's face went white as a sheet. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "I didn't think so." Martha turned to Victor. "Your network of lies is falling apart, Mr. Aldridge. One by one, all your people are going to turn on you. That's how these things always end." Victor's eyes were wild now, darting around the room like a cornered animal looking for escape. Then he did something nobody expected. He lunged forward and grabbed Ethan by the collar, yanking the boy toward him with violent force. "You ruined everything," Victor screamed, his face inches from Ethan's. "Your father ruined my life, and now you're doing the same thing. I should have finished your family when I had the chance." Time seemed to stop. The words hung in the air like poison. "When I had the chance." Ethan stared into Victor's wild eyes. Connections formed in his mind, pieces falling into place like the tumblers in a lock. "The car accident," Ethan whispered. "My father's accident. It wasn't an accident, was it?" Victor's grip loosened. His face crumbled as he realized what he had just said. "It was you," Ethan said. Tears were streaming down his face now, but his voice was steady. "You killed my father." The bank went absolutely silent. A woman in the crowd gasped. A man cursed under his breath. Everyone was recording. Every phone pointed at Victor's horrified face. He had just confessed to murder in front of hundreds of witnesses. Martha's voice sliced through the silence like a blade. "Mr. Aldridge, you just confessed to murder in front of approximately 200 witnesses and at least 50 recording devices. I strongly suggest you release that child and remain where you are until the police arrive." Victor released Ethan so suddenly, the boy stumbled backward. Samuel caught him, steadying him with gentle hands. "I didn't mean, that's not what I—" Victor's voice was barely recognizable. The confident businessman was gone. In his place was a frightened, desperate man watching his entire world collapse. "Save it for the trial," Martha said coldly. She was already on the phone. "Yes, this is Martha Collins. I need the police at First National Bank immediately. We have a confession to murder and multiple financial crimes. The suspect is Victor Aldridge. Yes, that Victor Aldridge." The next hour was pure chaos. Police arrived first, 4 cars with lights flashing. Then detectives in unmarked vehicles. Then news vans with satellite dishes on their roofs, reporters fighting to get through the doors. Victor was handcuffed and led out of the bank in front of a crowd that had grown to fill the entire street. Cameras flashed. Questions were shouted. Victor kept his head down, his expensive suit wrinkled and disheveled, his silver hair falling across his face. Patricia Wells was also arrested, protesting loudly that she hadn't done anything wrong, that Victor had forced her to lie. Nobody seemed to believe her. Gregory, Victor's assistant, disappeared sometime during the chaos. Police were looking for him. Through it all, Ethan sat on a bench near the entrance, wrapped in a blanket someone had given him. Samuel sat beside him, a comforting presence in the storm. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Finally, Samuel spoke. "Your father would be very proud of you today, son." Ethan looked at the broken watch on his wrist. The hands still pointed to 9:47. "I just wanted to get medicine for my mom," he said quietly. "I didn't expect any of this. I didn't want any of this." "Life rarely goes the way we expect," Samuel said gently. "But sometimes, when we least expect it, it goes better than we could have imagined." Martha approached them, her phone still in her hand. "Ethan, we need to talk about what happens next." Ethan looked up at her wearily. "What do you mean? Those documents prove that your father was a full partner in Parker and Aldridge Security Systems. Equal partners, 50-50. That means your family is legally entitled to half of everything Victor built using your father's designs." She sat down across from him, her expression serious but kind. "We are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, Ethan, maybe more than $1 billion once we finish the accounting." Ethan blinked. The numbers didn't even make sense to him. "And that's separate from Victor's promise in the bank today," Martha continued. $100 million if you open the safe. There were hundreds of witnesses. That's a verbal contract, and we'll hold him to it." Ethan felt dizzy. This morning he had $47. Now people were talking about billions. "My mom," he said suddenly. "I need to call my mom. She needs her medicine. She needs the operation." Martha smiled warmly. "We're going to take care of everything. I've already called a medical team. The best doctors in the city are on their way to your apartment right now. Your mother will have her operation within the week at the finest hospital in the state." For the first time in 4 years, Ethan felt something he had almost forgotten existed: hope. That night, Ethan sat in a private room at St. Michael's hospital, the best medical facility in the city. His mother lay in a comfortable bed, connected to machines that beeped softly and steadily. The room was clean and warm, nothing like the cold apartment they had been living in. Fresh flowers sat on the nightstand. A window looked out over the city lights. Grace Parker was awake, though still weak. She had been examined by a team of specialists who assured Ethan that while her condition was serious, it was treatable. The operation was scheduled for the following week. "I don't understand," Grace whispered. Her eyes were filled with confusion and wonder. "This morning you went to ask for a loan. Now people are saying we're, what, millionaires? Billionaires? It's complicated, Mom." Ethan held her hand gently. "It's about Dad." Grace's expression changed. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, sadness, or was it guilt? "What about your father?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Mom, did you know that Dad was partnered with Victor Aldridge?" Grace was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I knew." Ethan felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "What? I knew about the partnership? Your father?" He was so excited at first. He said Victor was going to help him change the world, make safes that could protect people, important documents, family treasures. He had so many ideas. Tears began to roll down her cheeks, but then things changed. Victor started taking control of everything, making decisions without asking your father, taking credit for his designs. Michael wanted out, but Victor wouldn't let him go. He said if Michael left, he'd destroy him, ruin his reputation, make sure no one ever hired him again. Ethan listened in growing horror. "The night your father died," Grace continued, her voice breaking, "he told me he had proof, documents that showed Victor was stealing from him. He was going to meet with a lawyer, expose everything." She closed her eyes. "He never made it to that meeting. Why didn't you tell anyone?" Ethan asked. "Why didn't you tell the police?" "I tried." Grace's voice was bitter now. "I tried so many times, but Victor was powerful. He had connections everywhere. Every time I made a complaint, it disappeared. Every lawyer I contacted suddenly changed their mind. Even the police detective who was investigating the accident. He retired early and moved out of state." She looked at her son with haunted eyes. "I was scared, Ethan, scared that if I kept pushing, he would come after us, after you, so I stopped. I stayed quiet. I let them win." She broke down crying. "I'm so sorry. I failed your father. I failed you." Ethan wrapped his arms around his mother, holding her close. "You didn't fail anyone, Mom. You kept us alive. You kept us together. That's all that matters." He thought about his father's watch still on his wrist. The watch stopped at 9:47, the watch that carried his father's mark inside. "Dad didn't give up either," Ethan said softly. "He left breadcrumbs, clues. He knew someday someone would find the truth." He pulled back and looked at his mother. "And I found it. We found it together, and now Victor is going to pay for what he did." Grace wiped her eyes. She looked at her son, really looked at him, and saw something new there. Strength, determination, courage. He wasn't a little boy anymore. He was his father's son. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered. "So proud." The trial of Victor Aldridge began 3 months later. It was the biggest news story the country had seen in decades. Every channel covered it. Every newspaper ran front-page stories. The internet exploded with theories and debates. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, analyzed by handwriting experts who testified that Michael Parker's signatures had been copied after his death. Financial records showing millions of dollars diverted from the partnership into Victor's personal accounts. Testimony from former employees who had been paid to keep quiet, now coming forward with their own stories of fraud and intimidation. And most damaging of all, the investigation into Michael Parker's death. It turned out that Victor had paid a man named Carlos Vega to tamper with Michael's car brakes. The police had always suspected the accident was suspicious, but without evidence, they couldn't prove anything. Carlos Vega had fled the country years ago, but phone records and bank transfers proved Victor's involvement beyond any reasonable doubt. He had paid $50,000 to have his own partner killed. Ethan testified on the 3rd day of the trial. He wore a new suit, the first new clothes he'd had in years, but on his wrist, He still wore his father's old silver watch. "Tell us what happened that day in the bank," the prosecutor said, and Ethan told them every detail: the humiliation at the counter, Victor's cruel challenge, the safe, the documents, the photograph, and Victor's confession. "I should have finished your family when I had the chance," Ethan quoted, his voice steady. Those were his exact words. The courtroom was silent. Victor's defense attorneys tried everything. They attacked Ethan's credibility. He was just a poor kid looking for money. They claimed the documents were forgeries planted by Martha Collins. They argued that Victor's words were taken out of context and didn't prove anything. But none of it worked. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts: murder in the first degree, fraud, forgery, theft, conspiracy. Victor Aldridge was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the verdict was read, Ethan did not cheer. He did not smile. He did not pump his fist in the air like some of the spectators did. He just sat quietly, holding his mother's hand, thinking about his father. Justice had finally come. After 4 long years, justice had finally come. But it could not bring Michael Parker back. No verdict could do that. No amount of money could fill the hole in Ethan's heart where his father used to be. Sometimes I wonder what true justice really means. Is it punishment for the guilty, compensation for the victims, or is it something more, something harder to define? What do you think? Let me know in the comments what justice means to you. Patricia Wells also stood trial, though for lesser charges. She testified against Victor in exchange for a reduced sentence, admitting that he had paid her for years to monitor the bank for any investigation into Michael Parker's death. She received 3 years in prison and would never work in banking again. Gregory, Victor's assistant, was found hiding in another country. He was extradited and charged with conspiracy and obstruction of justice. His trial was still ongoing. Samuel Brody became a key witness for the prosecution. His testimony about what he had seen and heard at the bank 15 years ago helped establish the timeline of Victor's crimes. When the trial ended, he shook Ethan's hand firmly. "Your father saved my career once," Samuel said. 20 years ago, I made a mistake, a big one. Victor wanted to fire me, have me blacklisted from the industry. Michael stood up for me, said everyone deserves a second chance. His eyes were bright with tears. I never forgot that, and I never will. Martha Collins became something of a celebrity after the trial. She gave interviews, wrote articles, and was offered partnerships at prestigious law firms. But she turned them all down. "I'm not interested in fame," she told reporters. "I'm interested in justice. There are a lot of Victors out there still getting away with their crimes. Someone has to stop them." She continued her work, taking cases that other lawyers wouldn't touch, fighting for people who had no one else to fight for them. Sometimes, Ethan would get letters from people she had helped. They would thank him for being brave, for opening the safe, for exposing the truth. He kept every letter in a box under his bed. 1 year after the trial, Ethan stood in front of a new building downtown. It was a beautiful building, 3 stories tall, made of warm red brick with large windows that let in lots of light. A bronze sign above the entrance read, "The Michael Parker Foundation, helping families in need." It was his mother's idea. The settlement from the trial had been enormous. Over $200 million from Victor's personal fortune and company assets. All of it money that should have belonged to Michael Parker and his family. But Ethan and Grace didn't want to keep it all. "Your father wouldn't have wanted us to hoard wealth like Victor did," Grace said. "He would have wanted to help people, people like us. People who need a hand when life knocks them down." So they created the foundation. It provided emergency loans to families in crisis, real loans, with no collateral required. It covered medical expenses for people who couldn't afford treatment. It offered scholarships to children who dreamed of education but couldn't pay for it. And it was all free, no strings attached, no catches, no fine print. Ethan was now 15 years old. His mother was healthy and strong after her successful heart operation. They lived in a comfortable house, not a mansion, nothing too fancy, just a nice home with a garden and enough room for both of them. Samuel Brody worked at the foundation, as a senior advisor. He said it gave him a reason to wake up in the morning. Martha Collins served as the foundation's legal director, making sure everything was done properly and no one could take advantage of the people they were trying to help. Even Mrs. Chen and Mr. Bernard, the neighbors who had helped Ethan and Grace during their darkest days, were given positions at the foundation. Mrs. Chen ran the food assistance program. Mr. Bernard trained young people in mechanical skills. "We never forgot your kindness," Ethan told them at the opening ceremony. "Now we want to share that kindness with everyone who needs it." On the anniversary of his father's death, Ethan visited the cemetery alone. He walked slowly through the rows of headstones until he found the one he was looking for. "Michael David Parker, beloved husband and father, Locks talk to us. We just have to listen." Ethan sat down on the grass beside the grave. For a long time, he just sat there in silence, listening to the birds and the wind and the distant sound of traffic. "I did it, Dad," he finally said. "I opened the safe, I found the truth. And I made things right." He touched the broken watch on his wrist. "I think about you every day. Every time I help someone, I think about what you would say, what you would do. I try to be the kind of person you would be proud of." A breeze rustled through the trees, making the leaves whisper. "I'm going to keep going, Dad. Keep helping people. Keep fighting for what's right. That's my promise to you." He stood up and brushed the grass from his pants. "I love you, and I'll never forget you, not ever." He walked back toward the car where his mother was waiting. Behind him, the sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. A new chapter was beginning. That evening, there was a celebration at the foundation. 1 year of operation. Hundreds of families helped. Thousands of lives changed. Music played. People laughed and talked and shared their stories. Children ran around, playing games, their faces bright with joy. Ethan was helping arrange chairs in the main hall when he felt a tug on his sleeve. He looked down to see a young boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old, with messy brown hair and shoes that were held together with tape. The boy reminded Ethan of himself just 1 year ago. "Excuse me," the boy said shyly. "Are you Ethan Parker?" "That's me. My mom says you helped us, paid for her medicine when she was really sick. She says I should thank you." Ethan knelt down so he was at the boy's eye level. "You don't have to thank me. That's what we are here for. That's what my dad would have wanted." The boy nodded seriously. Then he said, "I want to be like you when I grow up. Someone who helps people." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He thought about all the people who had helped him when he needed it most. Samuel, Martha, Mrs. Chen, Mr. Bernard. Even strangers who had believed in him when Victor tried to destroy him. "You don't have to wait until you grow up," Ethan said. "You can start now, today, help someone who needs it, even something small, hold a door. Share your lunch, be kind to someone who's having a bad day. That's how it begins." The boy's face lit up. "Okay, I will, I promise." He ran off to join his mother, who waved at Ethan from across the room with tears in her eyes. Grace came up beside her son. "You're good with kids." "I learned from the best," Ethan said, touching the watch on his wrist. Grace smiled. Her eyes were bright with emotion, but they were happy tears, proud tears. "He would have loved this," she said softly. "Seeing you like this, strong, kind, making a difference." "I know, Mom, I know." The celebration continued around them. People laughed and talked and danced. Children chased each other through the halls. Music floated through the air like something magical. And in the middle of it all, Ethan stood with his mother, surrounded by people whose lives had been changed for the better. 1 year ago, he had walked into a bank as a poor boy with nothing but $47 and a broken watch. Today he was still that same boy in many ways, still humble, still grateful, still wearing his father's watch, still broken, still stopped at 9:47, but everything else had changed. Victor Aldridge had laughed at him, called him nothing, said he would never amount to anything, but Victor was wrong, because sometimes the people who seem the smallest are the ones who end up shaking the whole world. And sometimes the safes that seem impossible to open are hiding the greatest treasures of all. As the evening grew late and the guests began to leave, Ethan stepped outside for some fresh air. The night was cool and clear, filled with stars. He looked up at the sky and thought about his father, about the lessons he had taught, about the legacy he had left behind. Locks talk to us, Ethan. You just have to learn how to listen. Maybe people were the same way, Ethan thought. Maybe everyone had secrets locked inside them. Fears, dreams, pain, hope. And maybe the key to everything was simply learning how to listen, to really listen. Not just to the words people said, but to the things they couldn't say. The things hidden beneath the surface. The things that mattered most. Ethan smiled and looked at his father's watch one more time. The broken face, the still hands, the leather strap is worn soft by years of use. He had thought about getting it fixed. But somehow that didn't feel right. The watch had stopped on the day his father died. And maybe that was okay, because even broken things can still have value. They can still tell a story. They can still lead you exactly where you need to go. The watch wasn't broken. It was perfect, just like his father's memory, just like this moment, just like everything that had led him here. Ethan went back inside, where his mother was waiting with a cup of hot chocolate and a warm smile. Tomorrow there will be more work to do, more people to help, more lives to change, but tonight he would just be grateful, grateful for his father, grateful for his mother, grateful for second chances, and grateful for the simple truth that his father had taught him all those years ago. Sometimes, when everything seems impossible, all you have to do is listen. Listen carefully, and the lock will open. So tell me, if you were in his shoes, mocked and underestimated, would you have revealed your success or walked away in silence? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that flip the script on arrogance.